some Torah. Let's talk some Torah. We're talking Torah.
Baruch et Yehovah HaMevarach and Hag HaSukkot Sameach. And we are going to continue our reading in our special reading with Everett Fox's translation of the Torah in Deuteronomy chapter 13. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. And it begins with this. Now remember, the Everett Fox translation uses the Hebrew as the foundation, so some of the verses are different. In most of your translations, this verse I'm fixing to read is actually in chapter 12. However, it belongs in chapter 13. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start off. Everything that I command you that you are to take care to observe, you are not to add to it, you are not to diminish from it. When there arises in your midst a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and he gives you a sign or a portent, and it comes about, the sign or the portent of which he spoke to you, saying, let us walk after gods whom you have not known, and let us serve them. You are not to hearken to the words of that prophet or to that dreamer of dreams, for Yehovah your God is only testing you to know if you truly love Yehovah your God with all of your heart and with all of your being. And after Yehovah your God you are to walk. Him you are to hold in awe, his commandments you are to keep, his voice you are to hearken, and him you are to serve, to him you are to cling. Now that prophet or that dreamer of dreams is to be put to death, for he has spoken defection against Yehovah your God, the one taking you out from the land of Egypt, the one redeeming you from the house of serfs, by leading you away from the way on which Yehovah your God had commanded you to walk. So you shall burn out the evil from your midst. When he allures you, your brother, the son of your mother, or your son, or your daughter, or the wife of your bosom, or your neighbor who is the one like your very self in secret, saying, let us go and let us serve other gods whom you have not known, you and your fathers, from the gods of the people that are around you, those near to you and those far away from you, from the edge of the earth to the other edge of the earth, you are not to consent to him. You are not to hearken to him. Your eye is not to take pity on him. You are not to show mercy, and you are not to condone him. Rather, yes, you are to kill him. Your hand is to be against him from the beginning, to cause his death, and the hand of the entire people at the end. You are to stone him with stones so that he dies, for he sought to drive you away from Yehovah your God, the one taking you out from the land of Egypt, from the house of serfs. Now all Israel will hear and be awed, so that they will do not any more according to this evil matter in your midst. When you hear in one of your towns that Yehovah your God is giving you to settle in, saying, men, base fellows, have gone out from among you and have driven away the settlers of that town, saying, let us go and let us serve other gods whom you have not known. Then you are to inquire, you are to examine and to investigate well, and if here the claim is certain and true, this abomination was indeed done in your midst, strike down the settlers of that town with the edge of the sword, devote it to destruction, it and all that is in it, and its animals with the edge of the sword, and all its booty you are to gather in the middle of the town square, and you are to burn with fire the town and all its booty, completely to Yehovah your God. It shall be a mound for the ages. You are not to build on it ever again. And there is not to cling to your hand anything from that which is devoted to destruction, in order that Yehovah may turn from the flaming of his anger and show compassion on you, having compassion on you and making you many, as he swore to your fathers. Indeed, you are to hearken to the voice of Yehovah your God by keeping all his commandments that I command you today, by doing what is right in the eyes of Yehovah your God. Chapter 14. Children are you to Yehovah your God. You are not to gash yourself. You are not to put a bald spot between your eyes for a dead person. For you are a people holy to Yehovah your God. It is you that Yehovah has chosen to be for him a specially treasured people from all the peoples that are on the face of the earth. You are not to eat any abominable thing. These are the animals that you may eat: ox, lamb of sheep, lamb of goats, deer, gazelle, roebuck, wild goat, ibex, antelope, and mountain sheep, and every other animal having a cloven hoof in 2 hooves, bringing up cud amongst animals it you may eat. However, these are not to eat among those that bring up the cud, among those that have a hoof that is cleft, the camel, the hare, and the daman, like a prairie dog, rock chuck. For they bring up cud, but the hoof they do not have. They are a tameh for you. And the pig, for it has a hoof, but it does not bring up cud, it is tameh for you. From the flesh you are not to eat, their carcasses you are not to touch. These you may eat from all that is in the sea. Every one that has fins and scales you may eat, but every one that does not have fins and scales you are not to eat, it is tameh for you. Every ritually pure bird you may eat, but these are they from which you are not to eat, the eagle, the vulture, and the black vulture, the kite, the falcon, and the buzzard after its kind, every raven after its kind, the ostrich, the nighthawk, and the hawk after its kind, the little owl and the great owl and the white owl, the pelican, the bustard, and the cormorant, the stork and the heron after its kind, and the hoopoe and the bat. Now every kind of swarming thing that flies, it is tameh for you, they are not to be eaten. Every kind of pure flying thing you may eat. You are not to eat any carcass. To the sojourner that is within your gates you may give it, that he may eat it, or it may be sold to a foreigner, for you are a people holy to Jehovah your God. You are not to boil a kid in the milk of its mother. You are to tithe, yes, tithe, all the produce of your seed sowing, of what comes forth from the field year after year. You are to eat before the presence of Jehovah your God in that place that he has chosen to make his name dwell, the tithe from your grain, your new wine, and your shining oil, and from the firstlings of your flock and your herd, in order that you may learn to hold Jehovah your God in awe all the days. And if the journey be too much for you, you are not able to carry it, for it is too far for you, the place that Jehovah your God has chosen to place his name, indeed, Jehovah your God will bless you. You may make the gift in silver. You may bind up the silver in your hand and go to the place that Jehovah your God chooses to place his name. You may give the silver for all that your appetite craves, for herd and flock, for wine and intoxicant, for all that your appetite may seek. You may eat it there before the presence of Jehovah your God. You are to rejoice, you and your household, in the place where he's placed his name. My addition. Now the Levite that is within your gates, you are not to abandon him, for he does not have a portion nor an inheritance beside you. At the end of 3 years, you are to bring out all the tithing of your produce in that year, and you are to deposit it within your gates. And when he comes, the Levite, for he does not have a portion nor an inheritance beside you, and the sojourner, and the orphan, and the widow that are within your gates, they will eat and be satisfied, in order that Jehovah your God bless you in all the doings of your hand that you do. Chapter 15. And at the end of 7 years you are to make a release. Now this is the matter of the release. He shall release every possessor of a loan of his hand. What he has lent to his neighbor, he is not to oppress his neighbor or his brother, for the release of Jehovah has been proclaimed. The foreigner you may oppress. He who belongs to you, as for your brother, your hand, he is to release him. However, there will not be among you any needy person, for Jehovah will bless you, and bless you in the land that Jehovah your God is giving you as an inheritance to possess. Only if you hearken, yes, hearken, to the voice of Jehovah your God, by taking care to observe all this commandment that I command you here today. Indeed, Jehovah your God will bless you as he promised you. You will cause many nations to give pledges, but you will not have to give pledges. You will rule over many nations, but over you they shall not rule. When there is amongst you a needy person from one of your brothers within your gates in the land that Jehovah your God is giving you, you are not to toughen your heart. You are not to shut your hand to your brother, the needy one. Rather, you are to open your hand to him, and are to give pledge, yes, pledge to him, sufficient for his lack that is lacking to him. Take you care lest there be a word in your heart, a base one saying, the 7th year, the year of release, is nearing, and your eye be set ill upon your brother, the needy one, and you do not give to him, so that he calls out because of you to Jehovah, and sin be incurred by you. Yes, you are to give. Yes, give freely to him. Your heart is not to be ill-disposed in your giving to him. For on account of this matter, Yehovah your God will bless you in all your doings and in all the enterprises of your hand. For the needy will never be gone from the middle of the land. Therefore I'm commanding you, saying, you are to open your hand to your brother, to your afflicted one, and to your needy one in your land. When your brother is sold to you, a Hebrew male or Hebrew female, that serves for you 6 years, now in the 7th year you are to send him free at liberty from beside you. Now when you send him free at liberty from beside you, you are not to send him free empty-handed. You are to adorn him with your flock, from your threshing floor and from your vat, from which Yehovah your God has blessed you. You are to give to him. You must bear in mind that a serf were you in the land of Egypt, and Yehovah your God redeemed you. Therefore I command you this word today. Now it shall be, if he says to you, I will not go out from beside you, for I love you and your household, for it goes well for him beside you. You are to take a piercing tool, and are to put it through his ear into the door, and he shall serve you forever. Even to your maid you are to do this. You are not to let it be hard in your eyes when you set him free at liberty from beside you, for double the hire of a hired hand did he serve you 6 years. Then Yehovah will bless you in all that you do. Every firstling that is born in your flock and in your herd, the male one, you are to hallow to Yehovah your God. You are not to do serving tasks with the firstling of your ox. You are not to shear the firstling of your sheep. Before the presence of Yehovah your God, you are to eat of it, year after year, in the place that Yehovah chooses, you and your household. Now if there be in a defect, a lame or blind, any defect for ill, you are not to slaughter it unto Yehovah your God. Within your gates you are to eat it, the tameh and the pure together, as the gazelle so the deer. Only its blood you are not to eat. On the earth you are to pour it out like water. Chapter 16. Keep the new moon of Aviv, ripe grain. You are to observe Passover to Yehovah your God, for in the new moon of Aviv, Yehovah your God took you out of Egypt at night. You are to slaughter the Passover offering to Yehovah your God from flock and from herd, in the place that Yehovah chooses to have his name dwell. You are not to eat it with leaven. 7 days you are to eat it with matzot, the bread of affliction. For with trepidation you went out from the land of Egypt, in order that you may bear in mind the day of your going out from the land of Egypt all the days of your life. There is not to be seen with you any fermentation in all your territory for 7 days. There is not to remain overnight any of the meat that you slaughter at sunset until on the first day till daybreak. You may not slaughter the Passover offering within one of your gates that Yehovah your God is giving you. Rather, in the place where Yehovah your God chooses his name to dwell, you are to slaughter the Passover offering at setting time, when the sun goes in, at the appointed time of your going out from Egypt. You are to boil it, and you are to eat it in the place that Yehovah your God chooses. Then you are to face about at daybreak and go back to your tents. For 6 days you are to eat matzot. On the 7th day is a day of restraint to Yehovah your God. You are not to do any servile work. 7 weeks you are to number for yourselves from the start of the sickle and the standing grain. You are to start numbering 7 weeks. You are to observe the pilgrimage of the festival of weeks to Yehovah your God, according to the sufficiency of the freewill offering of your hand that you give, as Yehovah your God blesses you. And you are to rejoice before the presence of Yehovah your God in the place where he's placed his name. Your son, your daughter, your servant, and your maid, and the Levite that is within your gates, and the sojourner, the orphan, and the widow that are among you, in the place that Yehovah your God chooses to have his name dwell. You are to bear in mind that a serf were you in Egypt, so you are to take care and observe these laws. The pilgrimage festival of Sukkot, huts you are to observe for yourself for 7 days at your ingathering, from the threshing floor, from your vat. from your threshing floor, from your vat. You are to rejoice on your festival, you and your son and your daughter, your servant and your maid, the Levite, the sojourner, and the orphan, and the widow in the gates with you. For 7 days you are to celebrate a festival to Yehovah your God in the place Yehovah chooses. For Yehovah your God has been blessing you in all your produce and in all your doings of your hand, and so shall be, oh so joyful. And you shall be, oh so joyful. At 3 points in the year, all your male folk are to be seen at the presence of Yehovah in the place where he chooses to place his name, on the festival of Matzot, on the festival of weeks, and on the festival of huts. And no one is to be seen at the presence of Yehovah empty-handed. Rather, each man according to the giving capacity of his hand, according to the blessing of Yehovah your God that he has given you. Judges and officials you are to provide for yourselves. According to the blessing of Yehovah that he has given to you. Period. Judges and officials you are to provide for yourselves within all your gates that Yehovah your God has given you. For your tribal districts, they are to judge the people with equitable justice. You are not to cast aside a case for judgment. You are not to specially recognize anyone's face. And you are not to take a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of the equitable. Equity you are to pursue in order that you may live and possess the land that Yehovah your God is giving you. You are not to plant for yourself an Asherah or any kind of tree structure beside the slaughter site of Yehovah your God that you make yourself. And you are not to raise yourself a standing stone such as Yehovah your God hates. Chapter 17. You are not to slaughter an offering to Yehovah your God of an ox or a sheep that has a defect, anything ill, for it is an abomination to Yehovah your God. When there is found amongst you within one of your gates that Yehovah your God is giving you, a man or a woman that does what is ill in the eyes of Yehovah your God to cross his covenant, going and serving other gods, and prostrating oneself to them, to the sun or to the moon or to any of the forces of heaven that I have not commanded, and it is told to you, you are to hear and you are to inquire well if here it is true and correct the matter. If so, this abomination was done in Israel, then you are to take out that man or woman who has done this evil thing out of your gates, the man or woman, and you are to stone them with stones so that they die. On the statement of 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses shall one worthy of death be put to death. He shall not be put to death on the statement of a single witness. The hand of the witnesses is to be against him at the beginning to put him to death, and the hand of the entire people afterwards, so you shall burn out the evil from your midst. When any legal matter is too extraordinary for you, injustice between blood and blood, between judgment and judgment, between stroke and stroke, in matters of quarreling within your gates, you are to arise and go to the place where Yehovah your God chooses. You are to come to the Levitical priests and to the judge that is there in those days, and you are to inquire, and they are to tell you the word of judgment. You are to do according to this word that he has told to you. In that place that Yehovah chooses, you are to take care to observe what they instruct you, according to the instruction that they have instructed you. By regulation, they tell you, you are to do. You are not to turn away from the word that they tell you to the right nor to the left. Now, the man who does presumptuously by not hearkening to the priest that is standing in attendance there on Yehovah your God, or to the judge, dead is that man. So you shall burn out the evil from Israel. And all the people will hearken and be awed and will act presumptuously no more. When you enter the land that Yehovah your God has given you, and you possess it and settle in it, should you say, I will set over me a king like all the nations that are around me? You may, yes, set a king over you, that Yehovah your God chooses from amongst your brothers. You may set over you a king. You may not place over you a foreign man who is not a brother person to you. Only he is not to multiply horses to himself. He is not to return the people to Egypt in order to multiply horses, since Yehovah has said to you, you will never return that way again. He is not to multiply wives unto himself, for his heart is not to be turned aside. Silver and gold he is not to multiply for himself to excess. But it shall be, when he sits on the throne of his kingdom, he is to write for himself a copy of this instruction in a document before the presence of the Levitical priests. It is to remain beside him. He is to read it out all the days of his life, in order that he may learn to have awe for Jehovah his God, to be careful concerning all the words of this instruction and these laws, to observe them, that his heart not be raised above his brothers, that he not turn aside from what is commanded, to the right nor to the left, in order that he may prolong his days over his kingdom, he and his sons, in the midst of Israel. Chapter 18. There is not to be for the Levitical priests, the entire tribe of Levi, any portion or inheritance with Israel. The fire offerings of Jehovah and his inheritance they may eat, but a normal inheritance they may not have. In the midst of his brothers, Jehovah is his inheritance, as he promised him. Now, this shall be the regulated share of the priests from the people, from the slaughterers of slaughter offerings, whether of ox or sheep. The priest is to be given the shank bone, the jawbone, and the rough stomach. The premier part of your grain, your new wine, and your shining oil, the premier part of your shearing of your sheep, you are to give to him. For him Jehovah your God has chosen from all your tribes, for standing in service, for attending in the name of Jehovah, he and his sons all the days to come. Now when the Levite comes from one of your gates, from all Israel where he sojourns, and he comes with all his appetite's cravings to the place that Jehovah chooses, and attends in the name of Jehovah his God, like all his brothers, the Levites who are standing in service there before the presence of Jehovah, a share, like the usual share, they may eat, apart from the sale revenues of their father's property. When you enter the land that Jehovah your God is giving you, you are not to learn to do according to the abominations of those nations. There is not to be found amongst you anyone having his son or daughter cross through the fire, an augurer of augury, a hidden sorcerer, a diviner, nor an enchanter, or a tire of magical tying knots, or a seeker of ghosts, or favorable spirits, or an inquirer of the dead. For an abomination to Jehovah is anyone doing these things, and because of these abominations Jehovah your God is dispossessing them from before you. Wholeheartedly shall you be with Jehovah your God, for the nations that you are coming to possess, to sorcerers and to augurer, they do hearken. But you do not do thus, as Jehovah your God has commanded you. A prophet from your midst, from your brothers, like myself, will Jehovah your God raise up for you. To him you are to hear. According to all that you sought from Jehovah your God at Horeb, on the day of the assembly, saying, we can no longer hear the voice of Jehovah our God, and this great fire we cannot bear to see any longer, that we do not die. And Jehovah said to me, that they have done well in their speaking. A prophet I will raise up for them amongst their brothers like you. I will put my words in his mouth, and he will speak to them whatever I command him. And it shall be, any man who does not hearken to my words, which he speaks in my name, I myself will require a reckoning from him. But the prophet who presumptuously speaks a word in my name that I have not commanded him to speak, or that he speaks in the name of other gods, that prophet shall die. Now, if you should say in your heart, how can we know it is the word of Jehovah that he did not speak? Should that prophet speak in the name of Jehovah, but the word not happen and not come about, then that is a word that Jehovah did not speak. With presumption did the prophet speak it. You are not to be in fear of him. This concludes our next reading of the portion of Deuteronomy for Sukkot. Tomorrow we will pick it up with Deuteronomy chapter 19. So, Hag Sameach, Shalom Aleichem, and we will see you soon.
We're talking Torah. Talking Torah.